So, at this moment, Obito did the perfect Rinne Rebirth with using his only one Rinnegan.
Art of Rinne Rebirth. It's just not a battle without raging blood.
But,
after awakening the Rinnegan in his left eye, Sasuke gained the ability to use the Six Paths techniques, which includes control over the outer path. Through this outer path, Sasuke should technically have access to the samsara of heavenly life, the legendary reincarnation ninjutsu, also known as Rinne Rebirth. And that immediately raises a major question. Why didn't Sasuke revive those who died in the war? Or even Obito, people whose sacrifices shaped the outcome of the Fourth Great Ninja War? This question becomes even more interesting when you realize that the Rinne Rebirth doesn't actually have a strict time limit. Madara himself built his entire plan on the idea of being revived years after his death. In fact, when Kabuto used Edo Tensei to bring Madara back, Madara was shocked and confused, asking why he was alive again. Kabuto explained that he had improved Madara's body through the impure reincarnation, but Madara still stuck to his original plan of eventually being revived properly through Obito using the outer path. This shows that, in theory, Sasuke, even as a fully matured shinobi in Boruto, at 32 years old, with complete mastery over his Rinnegan, should still be capable of reviving great ninja of the past, perhaps even his own brother Itachi Uchiha. The fact that he has this technique under his belt makes it one of the biggest unanswered mysteries in the series. But before we call it a true plot hole, we need to break down how the reincarnation ninjutsu really works. The first question is, does the technique have to be used within a certain time frame after death? And second, does the user always die after performing it? If both of these answers turn out to be no, then there is virtually no reason why Sasuke couldn't revive anyone from any point in time without consequence. The only reason it may not have been used is because Kishimoto, as the author, didn't want such a world-breaking ability to alter the natural course of the story. Still, we know the fundamentals. The jutsu requires the wielder of the Rinnegan complete mastery over the six paths and the ability to use the outer path freely. Sasuke certainly qualifies for all of these, especially by the time of Boruto. Normally the process works by summoning the King of Hell, who then releases the souls of the deceased through its mouth, returning them to life. So when you think about it, Sasuke absolutely had the means to change the fate of the shinobi world, and yet he never used it. Now, I said usually, because things didn't exactly go the same way when Obito was forced to use the Rinne Rebirth to bring Madara back. The reason that worked differently is most likely because Madara's soul was already connected to his Edo Tensei body, which then transformed into a living vessel. That makes sense if you think about it. As long as the soul isn't sealed away, revival is possible. When the soul is called back, it re-enters the original body, restoring it to a certain extent. For example, Madara had no eyes in his Edo body, but when he returned to life, his body was fully restored. Now some of you might be thinking, wait a second, Sasuke doesn't have the Rinne Rebirth technique. Isn't that something only Nagato or Madara could use with two Rinnegan? But no, not really. That argument doesn't hold up. Obito only had one Rinnegan and one Sharingan, and he was still able to perform the technique and even access the Six Paths powers. So saying you must have two Rinnegan to use it is invalid. Sasuke should also have this technique and the capability to learn it. In fact, Obito revived Madara with just one Rinnegan, so logically Sasuke, who possesses a special Rinnegan unlike anyone else, should also be capable. Remember, Sasuke isn't just any shinobi. He's the reincarnation of Indra and carries Hagoromo Otsutsuki's chakra. To deny that he has access to Rinne Rebirth when even Obito could use it is illogical. On top of that, Hagoromo himself used a similar ability, proving that this power exists within the outer path. So by deduction, all Rinnegan users potentially have the ability to perform this technique, which means, if Sasuke ever chose to learn or activate it, he should be able to use it as well. Now that we've cleared that up, the next big question is whether this jutsu needs to be used within a certain time limit. If the Rinne Rebirth jutsu can only bring back the dead within a certain time span, we need to rewind to Narutoushippuden and look at when the technique was first used. Back then, Nagato said, "There is still time to save those I killed in Konoha. which suggests there might be some kind of limit. But the problem is, it's not clear whether that limit came from Nagato's own failing body and depleted chakra, or because the souls of the victims hadn't been gone from the living world for too long, making their revival easier. Logically, many fans assumed Nagato meant there really is a time frame for how long someone can be dead before they're out of reach. But this idea gets contradicted later, since Madara's entire plan revolved around being revived with this exact jutsu, even decades after his death, and time was never shown to be an issue. Some argue Edo Tensei allowed Madara's soul to stay bound, making Rinne Rebirth possible, but that doesn't quite fit, because Madara himself was completely surprised to be revived with Edo Tensei in the first place, which means either Madara was clueless, and Kabuto unintentionally saved his plan from failing, or the more likely answer, time span isn't actually a requirement for the jutsu. Because of this contradiction, most fans in the community accept that when Nagato said there is still time, he was only talking about his own body failing, since his chakra reserves were running out. Now, onto the other flaw of this technique. Does it always cost the user's life? Looking at it as a whole, that seems to be the case. Obito even said in Naruto chapter 614 that the Rinne Rebirth consumes the caster's life, and both times it's been used, Nagato and Obito eventually died. To top it off, the official Naruto databooks confirm the same thing. Using this jutsu kills the user. The only reason Madara absolutely needed to be revived with it was because he wanted to return as a living human, not an Edo, so that he could become the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, something impossible without being fully alive. This makes the Rinne Rebirth not just rare and forbidden, but one of the most dangerous techniques in the entire series, even for someone like Sasuke who wields the Rinnegan. If someone actually used this technique, then after some deep analysis and critical thinking, as always, the reasoning given in the manga is that the jutsu drains so much chakra that it causes the user's death. Konan even implied this when she said that if Nagato used the technique at full power, his fragile body wouldn't survive. But the way it was written, it suggests that if Nagato had been at 100% with his prime strength, he might have survived. Remember, Nagato revived literally everyone he killed in Konoha. That's an immeasurable number of lives. And when you rewatch the scene, you see him sacrifice himself, turning old and frail, almost like his body couldn't handle the load. His Uzumaki heritage probably gave him enough chakra to even pull it off in the first place. Now compare this with Obito. He only revived one person, Madara, and he didn't drop dead right after. Instead, he stayed alive long enough to give speeches, fight, and even sacrifice himself later. In fact, when Black Zetsu forced him to use the technique, Obito nearly died, but was saved when Naruto revitalized his life force with his 6 paths powers. That shows Obito's eventual death wasn't directly tied to using Rinne Rebirth, because he lived for nearly 30 chapters after casting it. So yes, this is definitely a plot hole, or at the very least, something that needs more clarification from Kishimoto. Still, every hole has counter-arguments, and as fans we can create logical explanations within the rules of Naruto's world. My fix for the Sasuke issue, about why he never used the technique to revive people, is this. It's not that he couldn't, but that he shouldn't. Rinne Rebirth is essentially a forbidden kinjutsu, something against the natural order, and using it would create more chaos than peace. Sasuke, who was on his path of atonement after the war, likely understood that reviving the dead, no matter how noble the reason, was crossing a line. When someone uses the samsara of heavenly life technique, the common explanation given in the manga is that it drains so much chakra that the user dies from exhaustion. Konan even hinted at this when she mentioned that if Nagato used it, he'd only end up sacrificing himself because of how weak his body already was. But if you really pay attention to the way it was written, it actually suggests Nagato could have survived if he was at full strength. Remember, Nagato revived literally everyone he killed during the pain invasion of Konoha. We're talking hundreds of lives restored in one shot. And he only died because he burned through what little life force he had left. His frail body and lack of stamina played a big role. Now compare that to Obito. He only revived one person, Madara, and even after that, he didn't just drop dead. He actually lived for dozens of chapters afterward, long enough to play a huge part in the story, give Naruto and Sasuke advice, and even sacrifice himself later. That proves the jutsu itself isn't an instant death sentence. It just depends on the user's chakra reserves and condition, so why didn't Sasuke ever use it? Well, one reason is that it's considered a forbidden kinjutsu. All techniques that mess with life and death are banned because they violate the natural order. Sasuke, being a changed man, is trying to atone for his sins and wouldn't want to cause political problems by reviving people. Imagine if only Konoha had access to this ability. Every other village would see it as a dangerous monopoly. On top of that, Boruto has shown that the shinobi world is a lot stricter with rules now, with Naruto as Hokage following every law to maintain balance. So even if Sasuke could revive anyone, the political fallout would be massive. Still, there's an argument to be made. Both Nagato and Obito eventually died after using the technique, but not instantly, which leaves room for debate. And let's not forget, Naruto could technically solve this problem. He's already saved guys like Obito and even Guy by sharing his insane chakra reserves. He and Sasuke have merged chakra before, so if Naruto pumped Sasuke full of energy at the right moment, in theory, Sasuke could pull off the revival without dying. That's why a lot of fans believe this might come back as a plot device in the future, maybe even in a scenario where Sasuke sacrifices himself to protect Sarada or Boruto. At the end of the day, the most logical reason Sasuke doesn't use the Samsara of Heavenly Life technique is because it risks his life, and the shinobi world can't afford that kind of chaos. But as fans, we can agree this remains one of the biggest unanswered mysteries in Naruto and Boruto, and who knows, maybe the series will finally clarify it in the future. So that's all for today. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe and share to your friends.